Now, in just 3 years, councils have almost doubled what they spend on seemingly woke jobs. Local authorities splashed £23 million of taxpayers' cash on diversity, inclusion and equality positions in 2022 and 2023.
That's despite the Chancellor ordering councils to rein in the spending and make cuts to public services. Joining us now is Elliot Keck, Investigations Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, the organisation that described these costs as ridiculous. Well, I agree with you there, Elliot. We've got 52 million quid's worth of taxpayers' cash has been spent by local authorities on equality, diversity and inclusion. We have the bankrupt, overspending, disastrous Birmingham City Council only recently looking to hire an assistant director, community services and equality, diversity and inclusion on a salary of £103,000 a year. That's just the assistant. God knows what the boss gets. Now, we know that Whitehall's almost as bad, but why is it that this Tory administration has let so many organisations, local councils, the NHS, Whitehall, departments, ministries, spend millions and millions and millions of pounds on jobs to do with diversity and inclusivity? Why have they allowed this to happen?
Well, absolutely, and it's great to be back on the show. I mean, it's been really interesting over the last few months. There have been more stories about potentially bankrupt councils than I think I've had hot dinners this year. It's been absolutely extraordinary. We've seen council leader after council leader warning of the potentially horrendous impacts of bankruptcy. We've seen many councils, of course, go bankrupt. And listen, understandably, central government are looking at this in an election year and fearing the worst, and fearing that if councils are going bankrupt, that's going to mean huge council tax rises, and that's going to mean cuts to public services. But ultimately, if you don't provide caps on spending, if you don't provide caps on budgets, you're going to leave a huge amount of room to waste a huge amount of money. And that's how you end up with jobs like, let's say, Leicester Council, which has a race equalities officer, Black Lives Matter title in their council. And I think you just have to place a limit on some of these councils and say, you need to do more with what you have because you're not doing enough.
Yeah, take us on a little journey, would you, into your research and the sort of things you uncovered. I mean, how prevalent are these positions across local authorities, and what on earth are these people doing?
Well, that's an incredibly good question. So under the Equalities Act, councils and other public bodies and other organisations do have a range of responsibilities, things like equalities, impact assessments that they do have to fulfil. But actually 100 councils in the UK that responded to our audit said that they didn't employ any specific EDI roles, i.e. the responsibilities that were necessary responsibilities were incorporated into existing roles. That's absolutely the right way to do this. But other councils have chosen just to employ huge teams of often 12, 13, 14 people with job titles like staying well team leader, to take one example, in Calderdale Council. And it's costing some councils millions of pounds. I think Birmingham Council's spend over the last 3 years is over £1 million. This is a council that's now bankrupt. And listen, the list of job titles are enough to tell you that a lot of these are frankly non-jobs. But of course, this has an enormous cost to taxpayers, £52 million over the last 3 years. And that's probably just scratching the surface, as around 100 councils didn't reply to the FOI.
So you mentioned Calderdale Council, that's in West Yorkshire. It's a Labour council. Birmingham was Labour as well. But I think in all fairness, you have to point out that this council profligacy is not exclusively Labour. It seems to be not particularly party political. It's something to do with people who run town halls or something. Yeah, so Calderdale Council, as you quite rightly said, Elliot, has just hired a staying well team manager as one of 40 wellbeing roles that are costing £1,200,000 a year. Do you have any idea, this is probably unfair to put you on the spot, but do you have any idea what a staying well team manager actually does?
I'm not entirely sure that even the individual in that job knows exactly what they do. So I don't think even they could answer that.
I think you're probably right. So what needs to happen now? I mean, can councils just go, right, that's it, all you people who had jobs because Jeremy Hunt says so, now you haven't got jobs? One would imagine they'd have to pay redundancy. But if these things are tied up in legislation, the Equality Act, do we need to be looking at that and saying, well, that thing's got too much overreach?
Well, I think the point needs to be made to these councils that there is about 100 councils in our audit that, as I said, incorporate the pre-existing roles into or the necessary responsibilities rather into pre-existing roles. I think absolutely there's a legitimate conversation to be had about scrapping the Equalities Act. But even with the Equalities Act, we don't need these jobs. These are responsibilities that can be done by other team members. And I think, listen, this is why these conversations are important, because we need local taxpayers to be holding their councils to account, saying to their local councils when that those rates go up, as they will be going up in the next few weeks, you know, how are you spending our money? Are you employing a whole load of people that frankly you don't need to be employing? And that's for local councillors to ensure they're doing their democratic duty by holding their town hall officials to account.
Shouldn't there be, Elliot, in all these councils, perhaps a government appointment, some official in charge of having a look at these fiscal arrangements and how much money they're spending on diversity officers, because it's out of control? Shouldn't the government get some kind of handle on this and try to stop it?
I mean, listen, it sounds like a good idea on face value, but unfortunately, I'd imagine a lot of the people employed to do those jobs would be recommending that those councils be spending more and hiring more. But listen, I mean, it's certainly something that maybe could be tested somewhere.
Blimey, I think if you were to get rid of all the equality officers in Whitehall, in the MOD, across councils, in the NHS, then suddenly we'd have a huge unemployment level. It's an industry in itself. It's probably 1% of our GDP these days.
It is an industry. That's exactly what it is.
Isn't it? It's ridiculous.
Thanks for being on the show, Elliot, and thanks for being so diverse. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.